All right. What's up, guys? This is Coach Jared from the Unfair Advantage podcast, and I'll tell Chad why we call it that here in a little bit. But yeah, I have I would say one of my mentors, the great, the CWS, the three named beast, Chad Wesley Smith. I am super pumped for this. I'm super excited that you were willing to do this, Chad. So thanks again for coming on.
Yeah, for sure, man. Glad to help.
Yeah, so Chad was, in high school, played a ton of sports. Seemed like throwing was the one that stuck. Did that for a little while, and I'll let you go through all this. But then, just very well accomplished athlete, and then went ahead and switched into the sport that he was maybe built to do, and that was powerlifting. And then I think you said it, but you were a pajama wrestler do you still pajama wrestle?
I haven't turned jiu-jitsu in about, man, like 8 months probably, but purple belt in jiu-jitsu, competed some there, but from the start, I started coaching high school football again last year after about a 15-year hiatus of that. So through the season, I was like, there's just no time. And then just having like different problems, knee, back, not like bad stuff, just like, and this hurts, and if I go to jiu-jitsu, it's going to hurt a lot more, and then it's going
And
to
then you
be,
can't golf.
then I can't golf, for then, just having to like demonstrate a bunch of like high knees and that kind of stuff, different sprinting drills within my football strength conditioning coaching stuff. I was like, I'm not going to be able to do those, so I need to.
Absolutely. So, and then where you will probably know Chad's beautiful eyes from the most is going to be, he is the owner and founder of Juggernaut Training Systems, and is it the Juggernaut AI app then?
Yes, sir.
Yep. So that's definitely, if you are in the strength conditioning world at all, a lot of my athletes will say, hey, where can I kind of start learning more about this stuff that, some of my better athletes, they want to learn more about what we're doing. And I just send them to the Juggernaut YouTube channel, which it seems like you started posting a little bit more again on. So I'd love to see you keep rolling.
At one point, people were like, hey, do you still do this? And I was like, yeah, but haven't I already told you everything there is to, I haven't invented some new way of squatting, but I guess
Yeah.
an 8-year-old video of me with wild curly hair explaining squat isn't apparently useful as a new one of me saying the same thing with no hair. But
And the last thing that I know you for is that you are the creator of many lifestyle brands. I don't know if you remember, but you were like the king of like creating these off the cuff, it seemed like, lifestyle brands. What are some of the lifestyle brands that you can think that you've created?
oh, like probably waffles and weightlifting, pints and PRs, milligrams and kilograms. The more you take, the more you make.
That was on a shirt, wasn't it?
That is on a shirt. That's on.
Did you?
I have a coffee mug, and I probably drank coffee out of that this morning.
There
Let's
you go.
see. What other ones do we have? There were some pretty clever ones in there, but
There were.
yeah.
You'll have to go back and listen to the Jug Life podcast where you would start every episode out with the new one. And you kind of got me going. I started coming up with those. But yeah, you'd be like, yeah, pints and PRs, it's a lifestyle.
Yeah, everything was, lifestyle brands were so hot there for a minute that we just had new sponsors every week. A lot of the companies didn't last. Yeah, they went out of business after a week, but
Donuts and deadlifts, right? Wasn't that one of them?
well, that's a real one. Yeah.
Yeah, but is that still in business? That's what I mean. That's one of the real ones?
Yeah.
All right. Well, I will. I kind of want to let you go through now, and so, like I said, I told you I primarily have a lot of like our high school athletes listening to this, and I think like I said, I learned even before I ever competed for Juggernaut. I was learning from you from the second I kind of started this journey. So a lot of the things that I feel like my coaching philosophies come from a lot of the things that you've said. So I'd love to just start out, tell us how you grew up, take us all the way up to where you're at now.
All right. Yeah. So You want to start in youth sports or all right?
Let's
I
do
can
it.
give you a little quick. So just always kind of obsessed with sports growing up. Mm, Yeah, I'm 38, almost 39. So growing up early 90s is I'm watching. My mom said that I would wake up at like 6 a.m. and make my own breakfast even when I was like 6 years old, which was just pouring my own cereal or putting Eggos in the toaster. And I watch, the 6 a.m. Sports Center. And then I'd go in the driveway waiting for my carpool to pick me up to go to school. And in the basketball hoop out in the driveway and trying to recreate Michael Jordan, Hakeem Olajuwon, whoever I saw on those early '90s sports centers, and just obsessed with sports all the time. I had two older brothers, much older brothers. So my oldest brother Adam, he's playing high school football. He's 12 years older than me. So I'm seeing my 18-year-old brother when I'm 6 years old, and he's lifting weights and he can do like the pec pop thing. And I was like, my brother is the strongest man in the world. And then they were showing me you know, probably age inappropriate movies like Commando and Terminator 2 and stuff when I'm 6, 7 years old. So I'm seeing Arnold Schwarzenegger and I'm like, that's how I want to be, big and strong, and Rocky movies and all that stuff. So when I was like 9, 10 years old, I was gonna play football for the first time. And probably because I'd seen the Rocky Four training montage a time or two too many, or maybe just enough times, I was gathering up all of the like bungee cords that you would use to like tie stuff down the back of a truck, all the ones I could find around the garage and whatever. And I was bungee cording myself around a tree in the backyard and doing band resisted sprints, 10 years
So
old and
you were
pushing.
doing West Side. You were doing West Side.
I was a kid. I didn't know any better. So, so I'm doing band resisted sprints out in the garage or out in the backyard when I'm 10 years old because I was just always really interested in training. So get to high school, was always a good athlete growing up. Never like particularly big or anything, but had played a lot of sports at like a club travel level and beyond. Started doing track when I was 8. So like all the youth scene circuit for track and go to youth nationals and that type of stuff, and basketball and football and soccer and swimming and everything in between. So get to high school, but I was just kind of at that stage of life. I was, my mom would say I was growing out before I grew up. So I think at the start of 8th grade, I was like 5'2", and at the start of high school, I was maybe 5'8", like 175, just kind of like a chubby, mid-pubescent boy. And by the time I graduated high school, I was 6', 6'1", 275. So good, your standard 100 pounds of body weight gain.
Cool.
Yeah, yeah. So now I'm coaching high school football, so I tell our freshman football players this kind of thing a lot. It was like I was probably the third best offensive lineman on my own small, not athletically inclined high school freshman football team at 5'8", 175, and then 4 years later is all CAF, all Orange County at 6', 275, and could stand under the basket and dunk a basketball with no step, and you know bench about 400 pounds and squat near 600 pounds. And I was like, you do the work and you eat the food and drink the chocolate milk, and there it is. Um, so in high school, played football, was pretty successful as a football player, and then track. I was CIF champion. So the way that California is set up is in the sections, and obviously there's a lot of schools and a lot of people. So the southern section where I grew up and still live now was 660 high schools. And so they divide that into 4 divisions by school size. So I was the division champion my junior and senior year, 4th at the state meet, top 10 in the country in the shot put in high school. Went to the University of California, Berkeley, as part of the number 1 ranked by Track and Field News men's recruiting class for track and to throw the shot put. Only was at Cal for only on the track team for 3 semesters, and then only at Cal for 2 years. Um, left, which a lot of people did. Our number one men's track recruiting class was 13 guys, I think, and only 3 finished at Cal. Everyone else transferred or quit. So I ended up transferring and not doing track. So my last semester at Cal, I wasn't doing track. I was kind of burnt out on that, disillusioned by my experience with that, but I wanted to coach football. I'd started even like my first summer back from school, ran the summer camp for the football team at the high school that I went to, and was doing their strength and conditioning then, and loved it. And even when I was in high school, we didn't have a strength and conditioning coach. So I was my own strength and conditioning coach, and I was scouring the early 2000s internet of how to do this because I was just very interested, obsessed, you might say, in how to become bigger, stronger, faster, more explosive, more athletic. And I did a lot of things for that, probably a little bit too much training, a little bit of overtraining. But, you know, from there's this website for the Queensland Weightlifting Club, and you get like entire Olympic lifting programs on there. And I didn't have a strength and conditioning coach. There wasn't YouTube. There was, to learn how to do some of this stuff. So some of this like, what is it? A snatch? Like, what is that? Like all the way up, one move? Okay, let's just try and figure that out. But I was taking like this weightlifting program, and then a program that you could buy that they would mail to you, called Critical Bench, which is like more like a bench press specialty program, and then doing my jump soles training, which are like for people of the right age. To if they're getting East Bay catalogs, they would know jump soles or strength shoes as the front platform shoe. So your heel's off the ground the whole time, you get more stretch in your Achilles. These like 300 to 500 contact plyometric workouts with these weighted front platform shoes on. Probably not meant for 250, 260 pound guys to be doing that. The fact that my Achilles still exist is kind of shocking, but what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So that's why, I was dunking at 260, 270 pounds, 6 foot, 265 high school defensive lineman. Jump soles did a lot for me, but I'm taking like those 3 and mashing them together and throwing med balls and throwing the shot put and doing all this stuff. So I was
That's
always
awesome.
really into it. And I was so successful at kind of transforming myself in high school that even our high school football coach was, when I was a senior, really being like, hey, Chad, can you like work with this sophomore kid and kind of help him out with this training? And so I'd already had this sort of de facto strength and conditioning coach role for myself and some other guys on the team. So I was coming back and doing that, and I love doing that. And then started doing track again. After about 20 months away from the sport and away from really any serious training, at a school called Concordia, which there are dozens of, but Concordia Irvine, here in Southern California, with a coach, Len Bluetrick, who had coached me in high school some, my junior and senior year in high school. But I'd see Coach Blue maybe twice a week. So he was really just helping me out in the shot put ring. I still did all my own lifting and everything. And then, so I had one terrible year throwing my first year back. I threw like 53 feet. I'd thrown 56 feet as a freshman in college. And so with the 16-pound shot in high school, I threw 62.6 with the high school shot. And then, so I had this terrible year, and my back's bugging me. My pec is having these problems from throwing. I was just out of shape, and I was like, yeah, I don't want to do this anymore. Like I didn't want to come back and do track. Like, this is just a favor to Coach Blue. But for Concordia, a small NAIA school, I had done decently well. I think I got 9th at nationals or something. And so they were going to give me a little bit of scholarship money. And I was like, I don't want to do it. My parents were like, well, you can do it and take the scholarship, or like you can pay for this yourself. Well, fuck it. I guess I'm doing it. So I have sort of like a week-long pity party for myself about how I didn't want to do track anymore. And then like, well, I have to do it. And if I have to do it, I'm not going to do it like I did last year, because that sucked. So I guess it's time to become good again. So I went from throwing 53.1 as a redshirt junior to 63.10 as a redshirt senior. won the NAIA indoors and outdoors, went to a bunch of big meets, which was a nice thing about track, whether you're at a tiny school or the biggest school there is. If you throw far enough, if you run fast enough, jump high enough, jump far enough, you get to go to the big track meet. So I went to and won the Stanford Invitational and the biggest meet, Rafer Johnson Invitational at UCLA. And I always wanted to go to UCLA coming out of high school. So to go and win their biggest meet and to kind of look over at Art Venegas, who was their coach, who I had a good relationship with, but kind of be like, bet you wish you gave me that scholarship. I wanted. And he was like, yeah, I do wish I did that, but beat all his guys. So that was a lot of fun. And, so I finished up college track and actually passed on taking the throws coach job at Cal, which would have been this weird kind of full circle thing after having left there. But pass on that and had conversations with a physical therapist as I was coming through college and getting work on, various little injuries about what I wanted to do after college and how I felt that there was this need for, real strength and conditioning training for, mostly high school athletes, but here in Orange County, because there was a lot of speed, agility, quickness type of places, velocity, that kind of thing. Big, shiny, do your agility ladder and
Gimmicky.
Yeah. And I was all about, Joe DeFranco was like the big inspiration to me. And so this was 2009. I graduated college. So the summer prior to that, summer of 2008, I was in New York visiting my brother who worked on Wall Street. And when he was at work one day, I rented a car and drove to New Jersey to train with Joe DeFranco for the day. And this was like a religious pilgrimage to me to go out there. And, it was funny because, Joe and I, since, became friends, much more peers and kind of colleagues in that sense. And he had told me, he's like, John up. He's like, you're just some guy that sent an email and paid to come do a one-on-one training session. He's like, I didn't really like doing one-on-ones. And I can empathize with this feeling. It's like, I think the one-on-one I did was like, $300 or something. And in 2008, and the kind of thing where you set the price in a way like, I don't want to do this, but if someone will pay this, I guess I will.
Yep.
So it was that kind of thing. But then I show up and like outlifting everyone that they ever had in their gyms, squatting line. I think I squatted 570 for 5 there or something that day. And so about, 15, 20 minutes into it, he's like, oh, okay, well, this is not just some guy, I guess, who sent an email and was a fanboy. So did that and got to talk to him some about the business. And so anyways, with that physical therapist, I passed on that job and she hears about that and is like, do you want to talk about trying to open a place? So that was about May 1st, 2009. I graduated college 2 weeks later. In June 1st, myself and my then business partner, Nate Winkler, who's a guy on the track team with me at Concordia, one of my still to this day great friends, decided to partner up and write what we thought was a business plan. What our understanding of a business plan was. He was getting his MBA, so he should have known better. But we were a lot of Googling about how to write a business plan. So we write what we thought was a business plan, June 1st. Picture on it, July 1st, more or less, approximate dates. She goes for it. We get the keys to a warehouse on August 1st, and we're open on September 1st. And with 0 clients. We had 0 clients to start. I had been coaching high school football and track for the previous 3 years, but it was football season. So, those guys were off training. And so we're just pounding the pavement and hustling and trying to figure it out. Cold calling places, MMA gyms, jiu-jitsu gyms, trying to go and kind of pitch, hey, these are our services, going to club soccer tournaments and AAU basketball and club volleyball and all this stuff. and just kind of getting one here and one there, and then they do well, and then some of those turn into deals with the whole team. Some of them turn into deals with the whole club, um, and just kind of grinding away at that. From the business side of things, for myself as an athlete, uh, I just had this great senior year of track. I wanted to keep going. I think I was the number 3 ranked collegiate, so NCAA D1, D2, D3, NAIA, number 3 US collegiate that year. I was a lot behind the first and second guys, but was still third. So I was, thinking like, man, I missed almost 2 years of training here, almost 3 years of like real serious training, even with that first year back being kind of half-assed. I was like, I'm accelerating fast here, like, 2012 Olympics, like that's my goal. Coach Blue passed away right about the time we started Juggernaut from cancer. So that added a layer of complexity to my track career that I didn't really have a coach at that point. Plus, I was working about 75 hours a week, trying to get the gym going. So go through the 2010 track season, pretty up and down. Started off great. It was actually at this small meet that they put on, this like a Coach Blue memorial type of deal, because he'd been real influential with a lot of coaches around here. Threw my PR at that 20 meters, 65 feet 7 inches, and I was like, man, this is a real early year, like I'm doing it. And then work caught up to me, and I'd start having these technical problems with my throwing, and kind of be like, I don't know how to fix them now, because Coach Blue used to tell me what to do there. So the end of the 2010, my first post-collegiate track season comes, and I realize, like, all right, I'm not getting any better, and I'm not catching up to guys who are already 5 feet ahead of me, and they're professional shot putters who just train all the time, and I work 75 hours a week. But I'm already really strong, so let's see about this powerlifting thing. I'd written at that point a program that we called the Juggernaut method that we'd been using with a lot of people in our gym, high school, college athletes. And so I figured, let's put my money where my mouth is and do this program and get ready for a powerlifting meet with it. So I went to what was the first powerlifting meet I'd ever been to, and then I competed in it in October 2010. And after 4 months of training with the Juggernaut method, squatted 800 pounds, belt and knee wraps, benched for 210 kilos, 462, deadlifted 317 and a half, so 699 point something, but let's call it 700 because it sounds better. So went and did that, and took that program and had been working on turning it into an ebook, which in late 2010 was pretty big deal. It was kind of like 531 and starting strength were out there. And then the Juggernaut method, we released that on Black Friday 2010. It ended up selling over the course of the next 2 years about 10,000 copies. Got it. So they put me in Muscle and Fitness magazine, a big like 7-page deal, photo shoot, talk about the book, show the program in there. So that was cool, and just kind of that spurred a lot more writing, for Elite FTS, for then JTSstrength.com. So more writing. I probably wrote 50 articles, 60 articles in the next 2 years, and then come out with Juggernaut Method 2.0, and then start helping other powerlifters and weightlifters and stuff. That at that point, like, everyone was looking at me like, oh, this is like the guy who knows business. He knows, online marketing. It's like, I didn't know shit about it really, but I was willing to take a chance on it. And I knew more, I guess, than the other powerlifters and strongman and everyone. So I was able to kind of be this mentor and sort of facilitator for a lot of people to begin putting out their own content and building their brand. And a lot of that happened kind of under this umbrella of Juggernaut, that, a guy like Brandon Lilly or people like that were I was helping them write ebooks and do that and kind of get their own little thing going. So that just kind of kept growing. So when I moved out of our first gym in September 2012, our first gym location, I at that point kind of realized like, okay, I wrote this book. It sold $250,000 of copies, and I didn't have to pay rent to sell any of those. Meanwhile, I'm paying $6,000 a month in rent on this gym. And I was like, the stuff I really like doing is coaching football players and doing combine prep and that kind of thing. And so I can do that in a much smaller place or a sublease and keep writing. And then I was doing seminars and all that type of stuff. So in September 2012, when we decided to move out of the first gym, Nate had moved back home to North Carolina, so I was kind of on my own in that regard. Had the previous year after Nate had moved, working with a coach named James Smith, who, I can't speak to enough of how influential he was on my development as a coach, and understanding of training at a real high level. But from a business partner thing, I was a lone wolf at that point. So so move out of that first gym, start subleasing another place to just train football players and writing a ton, getting other guys to write articles for the website and building that up in September 2012 when we moved out of that place, which is insane how long ago that is, as I really say it. Because it seems like that's like 5 years ago, but it's right. There's a lot of these things. Oh yeah, about 5 years ago, 2010, 5 years ago, 2016, yeah, we were getting 25,000 unique visitors a month to the website in September 2012. By September 2013, that was 250,000, and that was all just very organic. We for that whole this whole time that we've really been doing it this way, the guiding light was how can we help coaches and athletes reach their goals? So how can we create articles, videos, books, online coaching, whatever, to help athletes and coaches reach their goals through better education, through better programs? And that sort of simple message resonated with people. Raw powerlifting was newer, kind of on the come up. Everyone was doing West Side. Everyone was doing equipped powerlifting. Was whether they were doing equipped powerlifting or they were learning from equipped powerlifters. That was sort of the only game in town. And then when myself and some people who were writing for Juggernaut came along, we're like, actually, that's not what we're doing. Like, that's not the best thing if you want to do that, go for it. But if you want to do raw lifting, this is what you need to do. And, spent a lot of time getting in arguments on Facebook about bands and chains and speed work and all that kind of stuff. And, seemed like kind of a waste.
Can we dive into that?
I'd say, sure.
A little bit?
Yeah.
I had one of my points here is like, basically talk about West Side and why it sucks. That's what I put for myself. But anyways, like we see, a fair number of athletes come in our gym and they clearly don't know what they're doing and they're just throwing bands and chains on the bar. And again, they just have no idea of why they're doing it, right? But they've seen somebody do it, or they're doing box squats and they don't know why they're doing box squats. And I try to explain things to them, but I think somebody with your pedigree might be better able to explain.
Yeah. So, it's all context dependent. Like for equipped powerlifters, well, it seems like it's probably the best thing. Why someone would want to do equipped powerlifting, I have no idea. I have no idea why it exists, why it ever existed. Like if you get injured too much, you just stop doing powerlifting. The way that when a football player gets too injured to play, he retires, but so if you want to do equipped powerlifting, probably do West Side. I don't know. Raw powerlifting though is just different. The equipment was helping people, helps you the most out of the bottom of the squat, off the chest and the bench press, off the floor and the deadlift. But those are the hardest parts of the lift without the suits on. So the training needs to be organized differently. Some of this could get into a discussion of like, well, West Side is a conjugate system, but not all conjugate systems are West Side. So could you do conjugate concurrent training for powerlifting? that's more effective for raw powerlifting than Westside is, what I would call Westside? Yes. If it's not 90% box squats, it's not bands and chains and changing max effort exercises every week and max effort dynamic effort split, then you're not doing Westside. Some people say, if you're not doing it at Westside, you're not doing it Westside. Sure, if that's the line that someone wants to draw, go for it. Anything you do within the walls of that place can be Westside, whatever it is. Even if it's not concurrent training or conjugate training at all, I guess it'd be Westside training if you were there. But for what we can conventionally understand from the articles that they've written and videos and stuff they've produced. So there can be better conjugate and concurrent training for raw powerlifting, but if you were doing what is conventionally understood as Westside within a reasonable person's definition, it's not going to be the best thing because it's not going to address the part of the lifts that are the hardest for raw lifters. It's going to neglect them. Then if you rotate exercises too often, too broadly, which I would say most people who do traditionally understood Westside would be doing for raw powerlifting, changes in bars every week, very drastic exercise changes, you're not going to get enough specificity in development and technical development of the exercises. Without, probably a pretty substantial performance enhancing drug use, you're not going to get volume necessary to build the muscle. Yeah, you could do it with accessory exercises, but it's just not as useful, doing it like 5 sets of 20 reverse hypers rather than a hypertrophy phase of deadlifting. And then it's kind of just, and maybe this is a confirmation bias, results bias, survivorship bias, I don't know. Every single, weekend, there's an experiment, dozens of experiments going on around the world about what powerlifting system works the best. They're called powerlifting meets. And when you go to the best raw powerlifting meets in the world that I've competed in, that I've coached at, no one's doing it. One person is doing it. Like and people who want to defend that will say, well, yeah, but what about this one person? Okay, well, what about the 99 others that weren't doing it, that were just good or better? And yeah, there's genetics and all that kind of stuff, but like that's such a simple way to understand. The best people aren't doing. They're not doing that. They're clearly aware of what it is, and then some people say, "Oh, it's because they don't understand how to do it right." It's putting other pieces of metal on a long piece of metal, and you make it go up and down. It's not that fucking complicated, Like everything about Westside, I've read every single article. I understand it. Like it's not that hard to understand. There's not this magic piece that I was missing, and that if I would have understood that, it would have. I think it was the best. So that's within the context of raw powerlifting, and not specific enough, not enough volume of the main lifts, not addressing the parts of the lifts that are that significant. And then even, let's say the last piece, max effort, dynamic effort. Dynamic effort is just not needed. It's not useful to train to move the bar faster in terms of becoming a better powerlifter. It's a dynamic effort days were important for equipped lifters because they served as a reduction in intensity, a fatigue management tool. Because when you put the suit on and you're lifting these weights beyond your body's regular capabilities, there's so much neurological fatigue that comes with that. You can't do it twice a week or 3 times a week the way that a lot of really successful raw powerlifters do. So, but you can't just do the lift one time a week because your technique won't get good enough. So that's where the dynamic effort served a purpose in there. Now, for other goals, sport performance goals, there are things that Westside type of things are more useful for. My high school football players, we pretty much exclusively box squat. That's like our primary lower body exercise because their sport is playing football, not squatting the most that they can while 3, old guys with self-righteous, depth standards tell them that was good. And then dozens of people clap. But yeah, but they're not doing powerlifting. They're, you know, so the argument of like, well, what's more functional for football players or more specific? Well, playing football is more specific. Box squat, belt squat, front squat, high bar back squat, you know, leg press, split squat. Doesn't matter that much. Like we do the one it's easy to learn, it's consistent on the depth. Like, yeah, because we're gonna test maxes and I got 90 kids, I'm not gonna walk around to 90 guys and be like, check the depth, check the depth. You know, we have to have a consistent standard so they can have their specific height box that I've seen and set it to. So we use that, and it's less neurological fatigue. It's you know, not as hard on their legs, so we can do more sprinting and that type of stuff. So it's got other applications there and is more useful, you know, kind of, I don't know if, you know, this is actually irony, but it's more useful for the thing it's not designed for. They didn't intend it for powerlifting. It's more useful in other settings. It's still not the best thing there, because why would I use max effort work and for these general exercises and use up a bunch of, you know, an athlete's finite resources to train and recover in something that's general to their sport performance rather than something that's specific to their performance. Yeah, Dr. Mike and I have
What
a
you're
long,
saying is, yeah, basically what you're saying is if you're going to go max effort, it ought to be in the sport, right? Within the confines of, or a closer training to the sport.
yeah, yeah, that the weight room is general for all, you know, non-barbell athletes. So, you know, with the analogy of like from Charlie Francis, that your nervous system is a cup. Everything you do fills that cup up to some degree, and then if you overtrain, you overflow the cup. Well, why pour more into the cup with the general means? Because a max effort squat is going to be more, fill the cup more, is more fatigue than submaximal squatting would be. But neither of them are what makes you good at the sport. So,
Right. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I think your best powerlifting meet ever was Pro Raw 7
right.
in Australia.
Yeah.
So you did a 440 kilo squat, which would be 970, right, in pounds. You bench 245 or 540 in pounds, and then 370 kilo deadlift or 815 pounds. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah. Best meet. I benched 567 at another meet a couple months before that, but best total was
And I
there.
remember at that meet, you actually should have squatted, I think 990. You had it and you about fell backwards at the, like after you had stood it up.
Yeah. Yeah. So 450 kilos, 992 at about 7/8 of the way up, and then kind of lost my balance and took a step back. So a bummer, but
Yeah,
hey, that wasn't 1,000 either. So really, who cares?
exactly. The reason I bring that up though is I think you said once, like you a lot of times you'd say like, hey, I did these numbers and I never put a band on the bar, right? Or I never put a chain on the bar to hit those numbers. So I just think that a lot of people need to understand that, like, you know, I mean, prior to West Side, like certainly nobody was putting bands on bars very often, right? And there was people squatting a lot of weight. So, I mean, if you hit all those numbers without doing any of that, it's probably not necessary for them to do it.
Yeah, and you know, there's however many people now, 30-ish, I think, that have squatted more than me, and none of them really did either. Again, unequipped squatting, and that is such a kind of like a funny idea to me from the sport performance world. So I first became, you know, like aware of Westside probably when I was like 16, 17 years old, and I'm, you know, scouring the early 2000s internet to learn how to train. And then I'm reading Elite FTS articles and WestsideBarbell.com articles and all that stuff. And you know, it would say like a super suit or a squat suit, but that didn't mean anything to me. I saw, you know, this we've had this many guys squat 1,000, this many guys squat 1,100, and when I was 18 years old and squatting 600, I was like, yeah, they probably can squat 1,000 or 1,100. Like, the idea of a suit didn't come into play in my mind, because why would someone, if I can do 600, they should be able to do 1,000. That's all that they're doing, and they're older than me. I'll be able to squat 1,000 one day too. And I think there's so few like sport performance strength and conditioning coaches who actually are aware of what equipped powerlifting is or what those squats look like. They just see the numbers and take them as face value, as I once did. And because of that, they're like, well, this has to be the best thing because all these guys are doing 1,000 and 1,100 and 1,200 even. But if they were to see what that squat looks like, they'd be like, well, we don't want to do something that looks like that. And to understand that, guys, a lot of guys who are squatting 1,000, 1,100 in equipment, if they had to take that off and squat to a legitimate, respectable depth, not even some like crazy, 3 inches below parallel IPF meet, but just like actual depth, what the rules say, the crease of the hip below the top surface of the knee, that 1,000 would turn into like 600, 650, 700. And I say those numbers because those are guys that I know. Some of the best, Greg Morrow, one of the best powerlifters of all time in equipment. Well, he switched to lifting raw and told me when he started, he's like, I got down there and I had never been to this place without the support. And his, 1,000 turned into 600. And did it build back up and he squatted 800? Yeah. But like within that first week or the first month or the first 6 months, it's not that. Like it's not there. It's
right.
Not more. Fugazi.
Yeah. So if anybody's listening to this and doesn't understand what Chad's talking about, go Google. What was that really good lifter for Westside a few years ago? Their last Dave Off. Go Google his last heavy squat, and I mean he maybe bends his knees like 3 inches. He's standing with his feet. I mean they got to be 5 feet apart from each other. So it's like a sumo squat.
If they want the real good stuff, and an incredibly early 2010s powerlifting cut, they could YouTube a video called like SPF squat compilation. And it's set to the song I Get By with a Little Help from My Friends. And it's really like the most egregious squats passed by the SPF. And it's absurd. And they all got whites. So
that's awesome. Yeah. All right. So we at our gym, I talk about the pyramid of specificity a lot. I think you coined that, right?
Pyramid of strength is the term that I would use. Yeah.
Okay. But it's basically explaining how specificity needs to increase as your skill level or as you go up in the ranks of your sport, right? So the transference among sports is more at the beginning. Like we recommend kids play a lot of sports when they're young, just as you did. And then as they get older, these sports start not transferring over to each other as well. And then by the time, they're in college, it's probably time to specialize. So could you go ahead and just dive into that a little bit?
Yeah. So this can be kind of looked at in a couple of ways. And this pyramid idea, is an adaptation from Anatoly Bondarchuk, transfer of training, Soviet throws coach for like 25 years. Tremendously influential to me and many, many others, that he would have his pyramid that's general developmental, general preparatory, special developmental, special preparatory, and competitive exercise in the top. So the pyramid of strength, the article that I wrote was talking about, basically the height of the pyramid is qualification of the athlete. So the more qualified you are, the better you are at the sport, more advanced you are. And the width of the pyramid was the specificity of exercise selection. And even this is kind of a small aspect of it, but base of the pyramid, you're brand new to the sport, let's say powerlifting, squatting, you can do any exercise to help your squat improve. If you've never done it before, bodyweight squats, goblet squats, leg press, lunges, leg extensions, whatever, you probably just think about squatting and you're going to get better at squatting. Then as you get better and better and better, up closer to the top of the pyramid in qualification, Andrei Milanichev at the time that I wrote the article was the best powerlifter in the world. And and he pretty much only did squat, bench, and deadlift. That was his whole training. And you see the same thing in weightlifting with like someone like Ilya Ilyin, that early in his career, and this is a quote from him through a translator at a seminar, I ran around the gym and did all the exercises as a 5 or 6-year-old kid. And does that mean that 5-year-old Ilya Ilyin had free reign of this Kazakh weightlifting gym to just play? Probably not, but he did, really, really broad and varied exercise selection. So he played games like basketball and gymnastics type of activities and track and field type of activities and whatever made up game little Kazakhstani children play. And then he did push-ups and pull-ups and back extensions and squats and so on and so forth. And as he became more and more qualified, he did front squat and snatch and clean and jerk, and that's pretty much it. So that's kind of within the context of one sport. But then it's almost like this pyramid would be built. There's a bigger pyramid built up with all these smaller pyramids of singular sports. That as you're looking at long-term development, I kind of look at that as a four-phase approach that, early life stages, you're going to, just play. This is like kind of the practical advice I give to parents with youth athletes is early life, play games, swim as early as you can, do gymnastics as early as you can. Swimming could be before 1 year old. Gymnastics is, probably one, even if that's a mommy and me tumbling class, it works. And then once organized sports can be introduced, usually about 5 years old. And that phase 1 from 5 to 8 or 9, do 4 sports per year, 1 per season, that you don't practice more than once a week and play a game once a week. And then you also have some sort of training, GPP activities around that. So that could be that you still keep doing gymnastics, or you're in a track club, and you might compete in track too. I just wouldn't really count that towards your sport. So I'm talking, typically team sports. So we're going to play, basketball or football or soccer in the fall and basketball in the winter and, baseball or soccer or something in the spring, and you do swimming or whatever, other sport in the summer, and you just keep doing that for those years, and you have this omnipresent GPP training along with it. And then you get to the second phase, maybe 9 to 12 years old, 10 to 13, somewhere in there. And you go down to 3 sports. So now you have one season that's now just for training, and that training's becoming a little bit more formalized and real. And now you're going to practice a little bit more, maybe 2 to 3 practices a week and 1 to 2 games a week, but avoiding what is so common in youth sports of early specialization. And you're 6 years old, and I see this, with my little flag football first and second graders that I coach. See our sweet championship trophy back here.
Damn.
Yeah. I see it with those kids and their parents, that the coaches are always trying to pull them in and you can play in our travel baseball team this summer, and then that travel baseball team is going to begat the fall league team, and then the winter travel ball team, and then it's 4 baseball practices and a tournament and a Tommy John surgery when you're 12, and same thing for probably baseball and soccer are the worst culprits of this. Basketball happens too, and it's happening more and more in football. Whether it's like junior All-American Pop Warner football, and then flag stuff in the off season, or what we call here forvert, which is like 7-on-7 kind of club teams, and those guys are running their businesses, and they want to get your kid to do the sport the whole year for their business, not for the kid's athletic development. Right. So they're getting in that second phase, and maybe it's 3 sports. So it's football, basketball, and baseball, or football, basketball, and soccer, or whatever. One season just for training. Don't let it be a tournament every weekend, and sometimes you might just have to tell the coach, like, no, we're not doing that. And there'll be a time where they say, okay, well, then you can't be on the team. It depends on the kid. And and all of this really depends on like the kid's ultimate potential. And for a parent to assess that effectively is tough. Because if the best that this kid is going to be is if I reach my absolute potential as an athlete, I'm going to start on my high school varsity team as a senior. Then all of this could get not thrown out, but moved up. That the phase one can be a little shorter, phase two can be a little shorter, phase three can be a little shorter. So you're going to have, because the end is near, the end is closer than it would be if someone has the potential to become a college or professional athlete. Uh, this kind of model would be more applicable.
So real quick, I want to jump in. My dad actually, when I was growing up, I played travel baseball, but my dad was my basketball coach, and basketball is kind of my main sport. So in baseball around here, we do fall ball. That's like a thing. And we told my travel coach, like my parents, like he's not playing fall ball ever, and he's only playing in the summer. And you want to know what? It didn't. They were okay with it because I was that good. So
yeah, well,
sometimes that's all that matters.
Yeah, and that's really why I said it depends on the kid, because if he is that good, the coach can say all they want. Well, if he doesn't play on this team, I don't know if he's going to be able to make that next team. It's like, well, if he's good enough, you're going to put him on the team because that's what
Exactly.
they're there to do. Yeah, so that takes some self-awareness, but just for the kid's well-being, you want to avoid, the too many tournaments, too many games, too much practice, them just getting burned out and not enjoying what they're doing. So while that phase two might be shorter, it still needs to be present, and the parents need to be mindful of it. So then maybe 13 to 17, 18, 14 on, to I say high school, you want to go to two sports and try and have those sports be complementary to each other in some way. So whether that's football and track, football and wrestling, depending on, kind of positions, football, basketball. You've got 2 seasons now. You're going to practice every day with your team and playing the games and everything, but you want to have 2 in-season periods and 2 off-season periods. And you might still, probably still practice your sport in those off-season periods, but the focus during those times is general physical preparation, and you still train in season. Like I've only been back coaching in high school for a year. And our football staff is awesome and really supportive of anything and everything I want to do, but it's remarkable to still see other sports on campus who don't train at all in season. Don't train at all, right. General physical training at all at a pretty prominent, would have 2 kids who just signing free agent contracts in the NFL after this draft. So it's like, this is not like some small town. This is Newport Beach, California, and people who are serious about it, and athletes who like don't do any strength and conditioning the whole year, let alone in season. But so the in season training should be prevalent, or should be there, and then you have dedicated off season times, and then wherever that peak is, which is college is going to be for such a small percentage of people, but so I don't want to get into pro because that's such a smaller percentage, but so whether that's at 15 or when you get to college and you got to specialize to one sport to make it happen, then you're into just regular annual planning, which is going to have off season, preseason, competitive season, ebbs and flows to the general physical training, but it's all planned out. But those early stages are the big ones. If people can get their kids into gymnastics related activities, doesn't mean they need to be a gymnast, but go to gymnastics type of classes and learn that body awareness and coordination and relative strength. Track and field related training doesn't mean you got to go do track meets, but sprint, jump, and throw, that's pretty much what every sport is made of. So get good at that stuff. The earlier, the better, because it'll stay with you for your whole life. Like, I was a senior in college. I was 6'2", 290 pounds, ran a laser touchpad start, laser finish, 468 40 with a 35.5-inch vertical. And yeah, that happened because I trained really hard for a long time and had, the right genetics and stuff for that as well. But it also happened because when I started doing track when I was 8 years old, I was a sprinter and a shot putter. And, we did the high knees and butt kicks and skips and all this stuff. So I had good sprinting technique because I learned it when I was a kid, the way that little kids learn languages easily and they have them with them forever. I learned that good sprinting technique early and had it with me forever. And Southern California 4x100 meter relay champions, 12 years old. Boy was running the third leg. That's where they put the slowest one. But we had great handoffs. And, those four little white kids from Irvine and youth track meets are kind of all very urban, let's say. Long Beach, Inglewood, all this stuff. So we win this track meet and we're high-fiving and I hear Dad, I get a bunch of little white boys beat you. And yeah, no, clap hands. So, but that training, that's a big reason why I was so explosive, I think, later in life because of that early training, not just the technique of it, but also when the athletes are young and that, especially like 9 to 12-year-old range, have a lot of neuroplasticity. So you want to just do the fast stuff, like avoiding conditioning and gassers and all that kind of thing. Like, don't make your kids do that. They're their whole life to run medium speed for a long time. All right, you got a short time to be as fast and explosive as you can. So whether it's, like a feed the cats type of philosophy and that sort of thing, like that's really, really the best for youth athletes. Build the coordination, rhythm coordination, multiple just planes and creative movement and do it fast and high quality and let your kids, play and have fun and rest a little bit too. And it'll pay dividends in the long term. The training that you want to do, there's a big difference between like training to be the best 12-year-old and the training you do at 12 to be the best 18-year-old, 20-year-old, aka the times when people actually care about how good you are.
Right. You used to say something like, don't ask somebody what they do now, ask them what they did when they were at your level. And I think a lot of kids need to hear that because they always see what I'm doing or what so-and-so's doing or the pros are doing, which throws a whole nother thing into that, which is the whole idea. And I think you said this too. A lot of the top athletes are great despite their training, not because of their training. But we get a lot of kids that see these pro athletes doing stuff and they want to do that.
Yeah, for sure. That's a tough one. And as valuable as social media and stuff has been to just give people more exposure and available information, sometimes it's too much and it's not the right stuff for people at that level. But yeah, a lot of guys succeeding in spite of what they're doing rather than because of it. So that's just kind of, I think, going to be a constant battle you got to fight as coaches, to help them understand that mostly it's the basics that are the best. And, with the NFL draft just coming and going and the percentage of guys there who, were 2 or 3 sport athletes, though I do advocate for multi-sport athletes, it's like, well, they're in the NFL now. They were, I'm sure, the best athlete at their high school. So, like with my high school football players I deal with, it's like, yeah, we got guys who need to gain 25 pounds this offseason to be able to, be a contributing varsity football player. Well, if you just born the right size and the right frame, then like, yeah, maybe you see a guy who's an NFL tight end and, he's 6'5", 255 now. And in high school, he was skinny. He was 6'4", 210. Okay, but he's still like a good size. He didn't have
Exactly
to be that off-season grinder to make that happen. So what the ultimate peak is, proximity to career peak, does have to be considered in all of that. But as much as I like those multi-sport stats that announcers and stuff and analysts will talk about during the draft, like there is a little bit of uh yeah, survivorship bias or confirmation bias, I think, with that, oh, good athletes played a lot of sports. Of course, they were the
No
best.
shit. No shit. Well, I want to be cognizant of your time. I know you got your golf lesson you got to get to. I got a lot more to
I
talk
give you
about
that
though.
one
Maybe you
about
can.
15 minutes here.
You got 15. All right, let's do it. Well, then if we're gonna dive into that, first thing I want to say is you. This was one a concept that I tell a lot of my athletes: treat the bar like your max, and treat your max like the bar. And basically, the idea, right, is that we don't want our technique to change. We don't want the intent to change of the lift, right? So, if you could kind of dive into what exactly you mean by that when you say that.
Yeah, so treat the bar like your max. That's really an intent and focus side of things, because can we just go bend our knees and stand up and not really think about where the pressure is in our foot? Where where's my knee position relative to my foot, how I'm hinging, my upper back pressure, all that stuff. We could just go through the motions and get that done and warm up, and then think about it at the later weights. Or we could take a little bit extra focus and get more and more value and more practice, deep practice, quality practice out of every set that we do. And if you think about it, they're kind of just fucking off with 2/3 of the reps that you do in a workout, versus being mindful and having great intent with what you do. They're like, that stacks up to so many more focused reps. uh I'm always preaching that with my high school guys, and we do like tempo runs, or we use this high-low structure. So like we're in spring football right now. Yesterday was a high day, compete periods, one-on-ones, team stuff. We're going fast and going hard. And today, a low day, is a lot more technical and teaching and stuff. And it's like, all right, well, this drill is at 70% speed. It's not at 70% focus or 70% effort. It's at 70% speed. So when you go slow, or when you're going light as a lifter, you have that much more capacity and ability to think about every technical aspect of what you're doing. So if you can be, you know, just as locked in, that much more locked in, and think about, where is this step landing? Where is the ball? Where is my weight relative to, my chest over my foot and all that kind of stuff. You have that much more ability and capacity to focus on those little things. I've had about maybe 6 years getting to work and do different consulting things for the San Francisco 49ers, strength and conditioning, and again, connected with a lot of great people there. Dustin Perry, their head strength and conditioning coach, one of my best friends, and a great coach and great mentor and resource to me. And it was like 4th of July last year, Fred Warner, multiple time All Pro middle linebacker for the Niners, is down here in Newport Beach for a little vacation with his family. So he came to the high school that I was coaching at to train like 6 a.m. in the morning on 4th of July. And he's out doing the tempo runs, his positional tempos. So kind of making like a linebacker move and running, 30 to 60 yards with that, about 70-75% intensity, and just getting his work capacity up. And for 10 minutes, I watched him, drop like a guy was running a seam, drop on air and run with this fake, wide receiver he was visualizing, and high point an imaginary football and intercept it and tuck it and turn and run. And the previous year, when I was at the divisional round against the Cowboys, he covered CeeDee Lamb on a seam route and broke the pass up in a very similar looking situation to what I watched him do for 10 minutes here on his own. There's no cameras around. He didn't give a shit about impressing me, making me think that he's a hard worker or something. I just kind of off on the side watching him do this. And I was like, Fred, I'm trying to get the high school guys and my MMA guys and stuff to be able to get more out of their low intensity work and their tempo type of work. I was like, you got any tips of what you're doing here? And I also mentioned, I was like, this looked a lot like the play broke up against the Cowboys. And he's like, yeah. So 2 years before that, it's like Randall Cobb ran the seam and Aaron Rodgers, fitted over me, and they beat me on it. And I was like, well, how many times do you think you worked on that between Randall Cobb beating you and you breaking up the pass to CeeDee Lamb? He's like, oh, out here, maybe 1,000 times. In here, maybe 100,000 more. And, trying to convey that kind of idea to these kids, and like, for football players, like, that was him treating the bar like his max, you know?
Right.
So then the other side of it, then your max, like 135, because you've done such a great job preparing, now you get to go to the competition, the part that matters, and you've done it so well and so, intently at the opportunities where you have to think about it so much that, like Coach Blue would always tell me, he's like, now you just shut your brain off. When you get to the competition, now it's the time for doing. So you have the confidence of your preparation to get under your max like it's a warm-up set, or to go into, the competition field and not have to think your way through everything. Yeah, and this is stages of motor learning kind of thing, because now we're in unconscious competence, that when you shut your brain off, your technique is that great technique that you've been working to learn, and now you can just go and express it.
Awesome. So with that, can you talk about a couple of the athletes that you like? What are some of the top athletes that you've had the chance to work with?
Yeah, so in powerlifting, number one is going to be Marisa Inda, 6-time USAPL national champion, IPF world champion, total world record holder for a time there in the 52 kilo women's class. Brandon Allen, he's stronger than me, so he squatted like 1,014. He totaled 2450-ish. Another guy from Australia named Gwen Johnston, he squatted over 1,000. Andy Huang, Steve Gentili, T. Papula, he was the 242 world record holder in the total for a bit. So a bunch of strong powerlifters in other sports, of like big name football players, has all been just like combine prep, which is, some weeks here and there. So like, he has worked with a guy like Joe Burrow, but neither I nor Joe Burrow would be crediting me with any of his success, nor his personal style choices. I remember a day in the combine prep, Joe Burrow is now this like Vogue fashion icon, Met Gala, all this stuff. He shows up to the training, he's got like, purple and gold LSU, like split leg track shorts on, and like this LSU dad hat, and a shirt, a fully sublimated shirt, that was a huge picture of a cat using a slice of pizza as a surfboard. And I was like, Joe, like, this is quite the outfit you got here, man. And he's like, it's just kind of like my style. Yeah, all right. But
Just
so,
like you and Sperry's. You
oh
still
yeah.
wearing the Sperry's?
Oh no, I wear regular shoes most of the time to coach, and if it's not that, it's probably just slides. But so if we can kind of look at, I suppose, at my wall back here, that's Nicholas Scarvelis. There's a Olympic shot putter for Greece. Sean Donnelly was a top 3 U.S. hammer thrower. A lot of jiu-jitsu guys. Philippe De La Monica is, where's my finger? This guy is our head professor at Gracie Baja headquarters. Otavio Souza above him was 4-time world champion, 3-time Pan Am champion in jiu-jitsu. The Cup Swanson in the UFC. Fabricio Verdum, Naaman Gracie, some up and coming younger MMA guys that I train now. Maybe the most freakish, impressive athlete. There's James is up there, but James was born like that. I mean, fuck, the guy's had his double quad tear surgery, and already back squatting 500. So I don't, think that really anyone but God can take credit for James. But Blaine and anyone, everyone up there
Blame
is
the guy.
extremely talented. But Blaine McConnell, get to work with him for I think 5 years towards bobsled stuff. And if people may be familiar with him from Instagram, just a freakish ball of explosive power. Another Team USA bobsledder named Kyle Wilcox, um, doesn't like to use social media at all, but another super strong, fast, explosive guy. Is also a developer, one of our developers for the Juggernaut AI app, out there writing code in his post bobsled career. Um, yeah, but I kind of in a unique spot. I think where there's a lot of people who are just sport performance guys, a lot of people who are just powerlifting guys. I've gotten to be around a lot of it. Track and field, bobsled, football, basketball, baseball, MMA, jiu-jitsu, powerlifting, strongman. I was a professional strongman too. Short career, but short but illustrious strongman career. And then getting to spend a lot of time around Olympic weightlifting as well. So yeah, I just gotten to, I think, use all of that to my advantage as a coach, in that I never got kind of siloed into this one area, but I was, a generalist, in that I was learning from a young age from strength and conditioning coaches, and for football and team sports, and then track coaches, the throws coaches, the sprint coaches, multi-event coaches. Like I just love talking to people about training. Um, and then as I got to advance in my career, I was fortunate, because of my own prowess as an athlete, that a lot of high level people were interested in talking to me about training. So I got to talk to great weightlifting coaches and physical therapists and bodybuilders and powerlifting coaches and everything in between, and try and take what's best and most useful from all that information and apply it to myself and the athletes that I work with. And I would encourage people that if they're weightlifting coaches, you don't have to just talk to weightlifting coaches about how to coach weightlifting, because maybe a track coach is going to have a concept, a principle that's useful for you to apply, and a powerlifting coach might have some, something useful for you about squat training, or bodybuilder is going to be able to tell you something about a hypertrophy phase or dieting, and physical therapists, guys like Quinn Hennock were so valuable to me in understanding how the body works better, and how to integrate those aspects into the athlete's training, so they don't have to end up going to a physical therapist quite as much, and being able to create more seamless return to play plans for people. So I'd encourage anyone listening who wants to be a coach, don't get stuck in your little world, in your little silo of your sport and your event and your field, because there's a lot of smart people out there worth listening to, worth learning from.
Awesome. So the way we end every podcast is we ask, what's your unfair advantages? And this is just kind of the idea of like, if you had to pick one thing, one quality that you have, that's kind of helped make you successful, what would you say that is for you?
Knee girth.
I didn't say physically
Oh,
successful. Maybe we're thinking
all right.
monetarily. I don't know.
That's made me successful in what realm?
Let's just say life.
All right.
You're a good guy. What makes what makes you such a good guy?
Um, I think kind of the stuff I was talking about with the coaching side of things, that whether it's personality or just kind of demeanor, I've been able to be in a lot of different worlds, a lot of different parts of life, and kind of learn from each of those. So whether it's talking business with business people, or talking training with training people, or talking business with training people, or you know taking these concepts and applying them across fields. I think it's it's helped me take what I was most passionate in life about and turn it into a livelihood for coming up here on 20 years and do a pretty good job with that, and hopefully help some other people along the way. There's a great book called Range by and David Epstein that I'd suggest for people to read in regards to that. Yeah, I think that I've just kind of always been, while I was never a very good student in school, I've been a pretty good student of the stuff that I was really interested in. They just didn't teach me much of it in school. So, to keep reading and talking to people and consuming content and even stuff that is with people that you don't necessarily agree with. Maybe you just kind of gain a different understanding of why you don't agree with it. There's a better principled standpoint, or you get something useful from it too. But yeah, I think, maybe I was unfairly well-rounded. Actually, that was superlative for my high school
I
yearbook
wasn't going to say it.
was most well-rounded, and they were doing that because I was on ASB student government and was really good at sports, and because I was going to Cal, they thought that I was a good student too. They didn't realize that I was only let in because of my heavy ball throwing abilities, but it wasn't even a commentary on my head shape or body shape sometimes, but well-rounded all around.
Awesome. Thanks, Chad. I really appreciate you coming on, man.
All right, bud. My pleasure. Take care.
You too, man.